So it's tax filing season, and many of us have been doing our best to make sure that we comply with the tax man, paying our dues, declaring the right amounts, and of course following through with any recommendations, audits, or concerns that might need to be addressed. But sometimes it can be overwhelming, having to manage your taxes in your personal capacity, for your business, or any other changes that might have taken place within your income and earning capacity. Other times we're actually financially stretched, and perhaps you didn't put aside enough money to manage the financial discrepancies or commitments that you have to SARS. And SARS might come back and say, hey, you owe us money. Here's a letter of demand. Or even worse, they just might go directly to your bank account and you get a notification to say, we've been here, we've taken what we needed, and you can contact us if you need any questions. So what do you do within that circumstance? Well, we're getting inside your pocket now with André Daniels, legal manager for tax controversy and dispute resolution at Tax Consulting SA. André, good to have you. Man, oh man, your title sounds amazing. I can imagine the stress levels you deal with.
Hi, Guru. Pleasure to be on the air with you and your listeners.
Definitely. I just reflected on your title briefly, and yeah, it's a very bold one. And I guess speaks to the challenges that many of us have as taxpayers, right?
Yes, no, definitely. Especially with tax, it often becomes, well, there are often feelings where it becomes personal for the taxpayer, hence the tax controversy. But coupled with that is the dispute resolution, because ultimately where there's a dispute with the taxman, we must look to resolve that dispute.
Definitely. And let's talk about that, right? So we're trying to pay our taxes. Maybe you might have skipped a few tax payment periods, or there's discrepancies within you submitting your taxes, and then you get a letter of demand. What would actually lead to that happening first before one receives a letter of demand?
Okay, so if I could just run through the process briefly. A letter of demand is not SARS's first step in collecting that tax debt. Often a taxpayer would have gone through a process of verification and or audit, and if they have seen that notification, they may have submitted certain documents and information to SARS, which then gave rise to an additional assessment being issued. And off the back of that assessment, the taxman will then seek to collect on that outstanding tax debt. If it goes over a certain period of time, SARS will then issue a letter of demand. If there's no response to that letter of demand, as you intimated in your previous comment, SARS may then appoint your bank by way of a Section 179 letter of appointment to collect those funds directly from your bank account.
Sure. So tell us about that kind of engagement, because some might say, well, I actually didn't get a further clarity or engagement with SARS, and now I'm seeing this letter of demand. I guess either this can happen because we might be ignorant to it, or it slips our minds, or we don't actively follow through on it. But in terms of that process, what kind of engagement is SARS looking for? Details, confirmation, and validation you mentioned. What does that actually entail?
So with the confirmation process and the verification process, sometimes SARS may see something that may have flagged you on their side, and SARS will then seek confirmation. We do often see this where taxpayers have large refunds or where there's no tax liability. Where SARS believes there may be a tax liability for a certain taxpayer. And it's not any alarm. It's just that SARS need to verify, and suppose of verification. Should there be anything of concern, the taxpayer will then be put through the process of audit, in which you engage with the SARS official, and they may have certain queries that they may ask you to clarify. And then once that's clarified, there'll be a letter of findings in which SARS will give you an opportunity to respond to them, not only in terms of the tax liability, but also in terms of certain penalties that may be imposed for the non-declaration of information or income.
Got you. Okay. So makes sense in terms of saying, hold on, we need this additional information from you. So let's communicate, let's corroborate, and of course share some insight. But that doesn't always happen. And then you get the letter of demand, final letter of demand. What to do then?
Correct. So we have seen this with many taxpayers where their first engagement with SARS that they're actually aware of is a letter of demand from the Revenue Authority. And obviously this, brings certain feelings of angst and so forth. Because if you've never dealt with the authority before, all of a sudden there's a letter of demand in your inbox. We then, as the prudent tax practitioners that we are, perform a process known as the tax diagnostic, in which we investigate your affairs with the Revenue Authority to see where the debt is emanating from.
Got you.
Should you then have grounds to dispute to that assessment that you are aggrieved by, we can then submit what's known as an objection, in which you object to that assessment, coupled with a suspension of payment. Because what many people don't know, and this is very important for taxpayers, is that by mere fact of you disputing an assessment, that doesn't mean that the tax debt is automatically suspended. SARS do operate on pay now, argue later.
Oh, shoo. Okay, that's a tough one. And I guess also means that, as you say, is by merely defending the dispute or saying that, hold on, I don't agree with this, it doesn't necessarily lead to some kind of finalization. So then what else can one do? Specifically, if it does get to the extreme where SARS does then go to your bank account in order to take the money directly?
So there are certain remedies available in the Tax Administration Act. And again, if we just go back to the article in which we state that SARS are actually one of the most underrated debt collectors in the world, because they have, such a wide array of powers which they can use in collection of that debt. And while an assessment is in dispute, it is important to bring with that objection a request for suspension of payment pending the outcome of the dispute. So it's sort of like going to SARS and saying, listen, this assessment that I'm aggrieved by is currently under dispute. Please can that tax debt be suspended while we await an outcome of the dispute? Because the taxpayer would be severely prejudiced, more than the fiscus, in a situation whereby their funds are removed from their bank account or they are forced to pay an amount where that assessment is actually under dispute.
And I guess, for Andre, this can be very intimidating, right? And confusing sometimes for individuals who might be going through this for the first time or not be very clear as to what the fundamental changes are. And I'm keen to understand from your point of view, are there typical mistakes that we make as taxpayers that often lead to a final letter of demand, to having your money and a directive issued to your bank from SARS to actually take the money itself, so that we can actually understand where we're falling short and what kind of additional capacity we need to build within understanding taxes and managing them effectively?
Definitely. And what I see with most taxpayers is they don't update their details with SARS. You must understand that SARS collects from, millions of taxpayers. The Revenue Authority is not going to check on your behalf, does this email actually go through to the taxpayer, where I'm asking verification, and it may even be a small question. Some taxpayers merely get asked, please share your IRP5 with us just so that we can confirm the amounts declared and that your PAYE, your pay as you earn, has been deducted and paid over to SARS. Sometimes it's a small question like that, but you often find where a taxpayer doesn't engage with SARS and where a taxpayer doesn't update their details, SARS has no way of contacting that taxpayer, and the only way that SARS will then seek to deal with the matter is by raising an additional assessment because you didn't engage with them. And I understand where taxpayers are coming from there, because they find themselves in a difficult position where they didn't actually receive the letter, but as per the law, it is a criminal offense to not keep your details updated so that the Revenue Authority can contact you.
Ooh, yeah, major lessons to learn here. And as you say, updating your contact details and following through with any necessary changes. In your view, have we also seen, in light of the pandemic, in light of cuts to revenue and income from some businesses as well as individuals, and of course the keen focus on taxing cryptocurrencies, do those feature at all in terms of some of the errors or the tax deductions that we not really quite clear about?
Definitely, especially where a taxpayer is not advised, as in they don't have representation to assist them in filing their return and engaging with SARS. It also happens where a taxpayer is ill-advised by unscrupulous advisors that will, sort of give off-the-cuff legal advice. It should be a proper legal opinion issued by that tax attorney to confirm the tax position and whether a certain income is or isn't taxable. And furthermore, the taxpayer should be prudent in seeking advice, where they know for themselves that in terms of their ability, it's not in their scope, it's not their area of specialization to deal with taxes and the revenue authority.
Oof, yeah, so make sure that we speak to experts, especially like yourself, right? So if someone does give you a call, Andre, or any of your colleagues at Tax Consulting SA, what do we need to prepare for before I just say to you, hey, Andre, SARS is taking my money and I want it back? What do we need to bring to the table and I guess prepare ourselves with when we do have a tax query and speaking to a tax consultant?
So, definitely. So when you approach a tax advisor, you should always ensure that you have access to your e-filing profile. And then from there, we can definitely assist you. You can bring any notice that you have that has been issued by SARS. But most of the time, as I said, with taxpayers, often it's the letter of demand that, only forces them into responding or only forces them into seeking assistance because they didn't receive the other notices or they may have ignored them thinking that they're not serious. Secondly, if the taxpayer could bring any assessments, anything that they don't agree with, but ultimately the e-filing details are of utmost importance because if you have access to your e-filing profile, we can then assist with a diagnostic and determine proposed steps from there.
Got you on that one, Andre. Andre, seems as though we've gotten a lot of attention, and I guess this really does apply to many South Africans, right? Because we try to do our best to be law-abiding citizens by paying our taxes. And we do have a question that's come through from one of our listeners, Thabo, who joins us now on the line to ask a question. Thabo, welcome to Kaya Biz.
Hi, Kuku. I'm listening here and I'm curious. I have a slight tax matter like that, but I had a tax practitioner who actually put in a assessment and then later she decided, no, you owe me money, I'm going to cancel this assessment and send it through to SARS and I'm going to get you into trouble with SARS.
Whoa.
What do you in that case do?
So
because I've been trying to call SARS.
Oh, we lost you there, Thabo. But as you say, you're trying to raise a concern with SARS, where the tax practitioner is actually the one who's said because of lack of payment on your part for her services, she then, I guess, got you into trouble with SARS. Andre, how do you manage that one?
It's a difficult situation, Gugu. What I can suggest to the taxpayer is that he immediately takes his profile back and, attempts to reach SARS and also reports the practitioner. That is very concerning from a professional, in my space to hear about these unscrupulous advisors. You should have that relationship with clients. I understand that, services rendered must be paid for, but at the end of the day, you should have a relationship with your client where you quote your client up front and you agree your fees with client before proceeding.
Exactly. Okay. So for the moment, he can't take corrective action against the taxpayer, the tax practitioner, but he definitely needs to get his e-filing profile back.
Correct. And in terms of taking corrective action against the tax practitioner, he should report that tax practitioner to SITE, the South African Institute of Tax. There's also various accounting bodies, SIPA, the South African Institute of Professional Accountants, SICA, South African Institute of Chartered Accountants. I'm not sure which professional body that tax practitioner would belong to, but there are steps that taxpayers can take when they have been ill-advised or underserved or not served by tax practitioners that they have contracted services from.
Got you on that one. Thank you so much for that feedback, Andre. And Thabo, I'm hoping that does help you and assist you in terms of your question. If not, we're happy to connect you with Andre in the background and perhaps Andre, together with his peers at Tax Consulting SA, might be able to assist. Andre, thank you so much. Really appreciate your insight for today. And this is definitely a theme that we will build up on in the upcoming weeks. That's André Daniels, Legal Manager for Tax Controversy and Dispute Resolution at Tax Consulting SA.